Hello, dedicated followers of ArchViz Ascent. Today, we're diving into an incredibly special and beautiful project, the architectural rendering and animation of the magnificent Ribbon Chapel. Have you ever tried to create a stunning architectural render and wondered, how can I achieve total control over the surrounding landscape and terrain? Or, how can I build a realistic, moving ocean material that truly captivates the viewer in the final render? We're bringing to life the breathtaking work of Hiroshi Nakamura, Nap Architects. In this video, I'll show you how to build a fully natural and controllable landscape material and setup, even under complex conditions. And most importantly, you will master the creation of an advanced, animated ocean material from scratch, perfectly simulating the motion of waves. We combine all this with professional techniques for high-quality, more 4K rendering and mastering day and night lighting. If you want your architecture to truly come alive, stick with me until the very end. I'm launching Unreal Engine. I select the architecture template and click blank. I'll assign a name and specify the project's save location. I select the default floor and delete it using the keyboard's delete key. Import content is typically used for FBX formatted files. I'm going to hover my mouse over the Datasmith tab and click File Import. I right-click in the content browser and create a new folder. I'll give it a name. We need to ensure that the checkboxes for lights and cameras are unchecked. For the resolution, I've currently selected 256*1024. You are free to choose a higher quality if you prefer. I'll save the project right away. I'm going to download a few wood materials in 4000 quality from the Polyhaven website, which provides them for free. To keep our workflow organized, I will create a new folder specifically for all the materials. Inside that, I'll create another new folder just for the wood textures. Now I'll drag and drop the texture maps into the content browser. This star icon indicates that they haven't been saved. Always save all from the content browser to ensure none of your information is lost. I right-click and create a new material. I'll double-click on it to open the material editor. I drag and drop the texture maps into the material creation window. I connect the albedo map to the base color pin. I connect the normal map and the roughness map accordingly, and then save the material. If I assign this material directly to the railings, I won't have control over its different sections or parameters. Therefore, I'll create a material instance from it. I will then assign the material instance to the railings. I've only covered the preliminary part of material creation here. If you need a more detailed and complete explanation about building materials, material instances, and using pre-made FAD materials, please watch the tutorial I previously made, titled 04 Unreal Engine, Mastering Materials, the ArchViz Masterclass 04. I'll include the link in the description. My goal here is to apply materials to the building very quickly so I can start building the surrounding environment. I will return later to fine-tune the settings. I'm going to create a material for the glass, I'll double-click to open it. With the material node selected, I'll set the blend mode to translucent in the material section. Then, under the translucency settings, set the lighting mode to surface forward shading. I right-click on the base color pin and select Promote to Parameter. I selected the parameter and in this panel. I'll enter a group name for better organization in the future. I double-click on it and choose a white color. I also create a parameter for metallic and set its value to 1 to ensure maximum reflection. I'll temporarily set specular to 1 as well. For roughness, I'll enter a small value, such as 0.01. Finally, for opacity, we'll input a low value, for example, 0.1. Now I'll save the material. I right-click on the material and click on Create Material Instance. If you require more detailed and comprehensive information on creating a glass material, be sure to watch my dedicated material creation video. You can easily jump to the relevant section by selecting the glass material chapter from the video's timestamps. The link to the material creation video is included in the description. I can either drag the material directly onto the glass panels, or first select the material, then select the object, and click on this arrow to assign the material to the glass. Choose whichever method is easier for you. I've chosen the specific texture for the floor as well. I'll drag and drop them into the content browser. The EXR files offer a higher quality, which is why I selected them. I have 1 texture for base color and 1 map for roughness. The other maps aren't necessary because I will be rendering from a distance, and the details from the normal and other maps won't be visible. I'll create a material instance from this one as well. I can rotate the material texture either using this gizmo or through the rotation settings. The translation setting allows us to adjust the texture's placement. I click Accept. I repeat the same process for the remaining parts until I achieve the desired result. If you look closely, the floor wood lacks depth because we did not use a normal map when creating the material. However, given our specific rendering from a distance, it's not necessary as the detail won't be noticeable. Pay attention to that red bounding box or red cuboid. We set the dimensions of this cuboid using the Dimensions panel, and its rectangular shape is defined by setting the projection type to box. The dimensions of this bounding box determine the size at which the material is mapped onto the object across all 6 faces or dimensions. I'm returning to the selection mode and creating another material. For now, I'm creating a simple gray material so I can quickly move on to building the landscape. I want this material to resemble concrete, so it needs to have low reflection. Therefore, I will assign a high value to roughness to create a matte and rough surface. We could also assign a normal map to it to add texture detail to the concrete, but it's not necessary right now. For the time being, I just want to visually break away from this default blue color. I'm entering landscape mode. I click Create to generate the landscape. Access to this pack was previously possible via the Epic Games launcher, but now you can download it through Fab. Just type its name into the Fab search bar. If you are not familiar with using Fab, be sure to watch my earlier tutorial, Unreal Engine, the Ultimate Asset Guide, ArchViz Masterclass 03. Since the beginning of 2025, accessing assets and materials is now possible through Fab. I have previously downloaded these packs, and they are located in the Epic Games Launcher library. If you have also downloaded assets this way previously, and the packs version currently doesn't match your Unreal Engine version, you can use this method to reintegrate or update them. Now I'll drag and drop the mountains I like into the scene and allow time for all the shaders to compile. To move them, the mountains, I must switch back to selection mode, exit landscape mode. These mountain ranges are available for all 4 seasons. I've chosen the summer variation. An important note in modeling and rendering is closing the horizon line using clouds, trees, mountains, or buildings, depending on the environment being modeled. Here, I'm using these mountain ranges for the background. This is because the original Ribbon Chapel environment is similar, and I'm attempting to replicate that setting in the model. I'm entering landscape mode. When we are in the Sculpt tab, we can shape the landscape's form. The first option is Sculpt, which is used to create elevations or bumps. Smooth softens the edges. Tool Strength adjusts the speed, intensity of the effect. For example, how high the landscape is raised with a single click. Flatten makes the landscape flat. Wherever we click first, it brings the surrounding area to that initial elevation. Brush size determines the size of the brush. Since I want to model a large area here and don't require details yet, I will increase the brush size. Brush fall-off defines the degree of soft transition around the brush's edges. This controls whether the change occurs with a gentle slope or a steep slope. I'm trying to shape the landscape to resemble the actual Ribbon Chapel environment, so I continuously adjust and refine it to match the real-world setting. Since my brush is large, the changes are applied quite aggressively, making control slightly challenging. See how quickly it became flat using the Flatten tool? I am entering the human view perspective so I can control the elevations better. I'll lower these areas. I must hold the Shift key while the Sculpt tool is selected. In landscape mode, if we go to the Manage tab, we can add or remove our tiles from the current landscape. I'll add a section by clicking Add and then clicking on the viewport. The created section is generated at the 0 point of the Z-axis in terms of height. I'll undo that. Now I'll create an entirely new landscape by clicking New. I can move the landscape before clicking Create, but once it's generated, movement is only possible in selection mode. From this panel, I can set the number of components. I click Create. This landscape will be transformed into the ocean. I'll create one more landscape to act as the ocean floor. Now I switch back to selection mode and adjust this landscape. I select one of the mountain ranges. I hold the Alt key on the keyboard and move it. This way, I create a copy of it. Now I'm shaping the surrounding environment using these mountain ranges and utilizing the rotate and scale tools to introduce variety. Alternatively, I could also use an HDRI map, and I will teach you both methods. To create the movement path, I switch back to Revit. You can use any modeling software you're comfortable with and export the data using the Data Smith or FBX format. The complete tutorial on modeling the ribbon chapel in Revit is available in the description and end screen. I will draw this path using the floor command. This warning indicates the floors are overlapping, but that's acceptable for now. I select the section I just created and export a datasmith file from it. It's better to isolate it first, then export, as in some versions, if it's not isolated, the entire model will be exported. In Unreal, in selection mode, we import the model using File Import. We choose a folder for it. There it is. Now I enter landscape mode and tidy up the surrounding area a bit so it becomes visible. Look at the brush. You can see two concentric circles. The distance between the outer and inner circle is the fall-off value, which determines the degree of softness around the main brush. This value is crucial when creating bumps and indentations as it defines the shape of the landscape, for instance. Whether we get soft hills or sharp mountains with steep slopes, controlling the amount of landscape modification around the model is somewhat challenging. It would have been easier if everything was built inside the modeling software. However, I want to show you how we can create a natural and excellent landscape with numerous edits, even under the most difficult conditions. I'll slightly decrease the brush size and tool strength to gain more control over the adjustments. I'm now fully covering the background and closing the horizon line by making copies of the mountain ranges. I right-click and create a new folder for the landscape assets. Now I'll create a material for it. I downloaded pre-made materials for this from Quixel Bridge. I'll drag all three maps, textures, into the material creation window for the landscape. I want the landscape to be a multi-material blend. I drag in the maps for the next material as well. You can download texture maps from other websites besides Quixel Bridge and Fab. You can blend as many materials as you want here. I'm organizing the maps now. I'm fast forwarding through the parts that are less critical so the tutorial isn't too long and we can quickly move to the main topics. I right-click in the viewport and search for Make Material Attributes. I'll use the maps I have to create a material. This specific map contains 3 separate maps within it. If the red channel is lit up, we have the ambient occlusion IO map. If only the green channel is lit, it's the roughness map. And if only the blue channel is lit, we have the height map. And today I will show you how to use all 3 of these maps. Of course, the full material creation tutorial is in the 4th video of the Unreal Engine playlist, which I'll link for you in the description. So we connect the red channel to ambient occlusion and the green channel to roughness. I search for the cheap contrast node and connect the blue channel to it. Now I right-click on the contrast node and click Promote to Parameter. I'll name it Height. I search for the name node and click on this option. I'll assign a name to it. I repeat the same process for the next material. Here, I search for Layer Blend and select the Landscape Layer Blend node. Now I click on it to select it, and in the Details panel, I click on the plus sign. Here I enter the name of one of the materials, and select Height Blend. This option is used to define how the 2 materials blend together. I will show you shortly. Look, a new option called Grass and another called Height Grass have been added here. Since I have 2 materials, I click the plus sign again and type the name of the next material. We name every material we have and specify its blend type. Now I search for the names I previously defined for the materials and parameters. Although I could connect the actual materials themselves to the blend node, it will get very cluttered, which is why I created names for the materials and height blend nodes. Now, I connect the outputs from this Landscape Layer Blend node to the base color, roughness, normal, and ambient occlusion pins, which we assign maps to in our initial materials. I select each material group and press the C key on the keyboard, and I can also write a name for it to keep it organized. Finally, I save all. I create a material instance from our new material. Now, I select the landscape in the material instance and use this arrow to assign the material to it. We cannot drag and drop materials onto a landscape. We must use this specific method I just explained. You can see here that the only option we can change is the height. because we didn't create parameters for the others. Also, since we named the parameter for both materials as height, we only have one option for blending. As you can see, the materials are not being read. We need to enter landscape mode, switch to the paint tab, and introduce the materials in the target layer section. I click on the plus sign and select the weight blended layer option, then click save. I repeat this process for the next material as well. See, now the material is displayed. However, it's very small and repeats too much. The UVs need to be controlled. So I enter the main material editor. I hold the U key on the keyboard and left click in the workspace. Next, I hold the M key and click to create a multiply node. Alternatively, we can search for multiply. I right click on the B pin and click promote to parameter. I'll assign a name to it. I need to connect this UV texture coordinate node to the UV input of all the maps, or create a name for it and connect that name to the UVs of the maps. If I use a single UV parameter for both materials, both will scale simultaneously. This UV parameter needs to be connected to the UV inputs of all the base color, roughness, normal, and ambient occlusion maps so they scale together. For now, I've only connected it to the base color for demonstration purposes, but it must be connected to all maps. I save it. I open the material instance. The details panel is closed, so I open it from the window tab. Look here. I can easily change the tiling of the material. If you need more explanation and practice regarding material instances, be sure to watch the material creation video, which I'll link in the description. To break up the repetitive look of the material, I'll go into the starter content and open the gold material inside the materials folder. Now I'll copy this section of the material graph into my landscape material window. I multiply these two nodes together and connect the result to the upper input. Now, I press and hold the M key on the keyboard and click on the screen to create another multiply node. I then multiply the RGB output of the base color map into it and connect the final result to the base color pin. Look at the patches on the grass. We were easily able to reduce and break up the tiling repetition. The section is bothering me. I need to fix it. Now I adjust the UV tiling until I reach a desired size for my texture. I'll reduce the brush size for the areas where the landscape intersects with the model, so I can control it more easily. I select the second material and paint it onto the landscape using the brush. I give it a moment to see if it recognizes the material. If it doesn't recognize it, I delete the saved files from the location where they were saved. I click the magnifying glass icon. It shows the saved location, and then I delete and save them again in the same location. This method usually fixes the issue. Sometimes it's necessary to repeat this 2 or 3 times. From this panel, I select which landscape I want to apply edits to. To assign the second and third materials, we must enter the Paint tab. I select the material. It prompts me that I need to save first. I click on the plus sign and select the first option for creating the layer. By adjusting the height parameter, we can control the amount of blending and fading of the two materials into each other. Another controlling factor is the tool strength. If it's not set too high, it gives the landscape material a more blended and natural look. Now, let's move on to the high-quality Megascans Trees. Search for this exact name in Fab, and it will provide them to you for free. I previously downloaded them using the Epic Games launcher, but now it's done through Fab. If you don't know how, be sure to watch the Unreal Assets video. I've explained it completely, and I'll include the link for you in the description. This tree pack is also excellent. Search for this exact name. It is also free and very high quality. I right-click on the trees, and if an air checkbox is not active, I activate it. This prevents the scene from becoming too heavy, allowing us to add a large number of trees to the viewport. I try to arrange the trees to closely resemble the original environment. I just drag them into the scene. I'm fast-forwarding the video so the tutorial doesn't get too long. For this far distance, we don't strictly need to place trees, but I'm doing it to make the scene look more natural. I adjust the size and orientation of the trees to enhance their natural look. Let's go ahead and create the water material together. First, I search for water normal and download 2 normal maps to simulate the waves. This one is not a normal map. I'll work with just one normal map, but you can download 2 different ones if you like. Similar to the glass material, I set the blend mode to translucent. And then in the translucency section, I set the lighting mode to surface forward shading. By right-clicking and selecting Promote to Parameter, I create parameters for metallic, specular, and roughness. I also set the numerical value for metallic and specular to 1. I hold the number 3 key on the keyboard and click on the viewport. I do this twice to create 2 constant color nodes for me. I select a color for them, but I will do the final adjustment later. I choose one to be slightly brighter. The color of the water's depth is usually darker. press the L key on the keyboard and click on the viewport. I connect the A and B inputs of the lerp node, and for the alpha input, I search for depth fade. I create a parameter for the opacity and name it depth fade. I'll enter an approximate value for now, such as 100. Now I connect the lerp node to the base color pin. I now create a depth fade node and connect it to the depth fade base color parameter. I want their changes to be synchronized. I search for clamp and create two parameters for min and max. Then I connect the clamp node to the opacity pin. Now I drag the normal map into the material creation window. I connect it to a flattened normal node. I then create a parameter for the flatness and connect it to the normal pin. Okay, finally, I create a material instance from the main material so I can easily adjust the parameters. I right-click on it and click Create Material Instance. I cannot assign the material to the landscape by dragging it, so I select both the landscape and the material and click on this arrow in the Details panel under the Material section. I open the material instance. The parameters are disorganized. It's better to group them. For example, I select min here and type opacity in the group section. I repeat this process for the normal and base color parameters as well. See, the normal and opacity parameters are now grouped. Now I assign different numerical values to them until I reach my desired result. Okay, I'll convert the base color values into parameters too, so I can easily adjust them. Right-click and promote to parameter. I'll then do the grouping myself. To make the water move, we need to animate the normal map. So I search for Panner and connect it to the normal map. To control the size of the waves, I hold the U key on the keyboard and click on the screen to create a texture coordinate node. Now I create the multiply node and connect it to the coordinate input, and then I create a parameter for it. I can also change the name from here. I'll also create a parameter for the speed. And I save it. Let's go see the changes. To keep the material creation organized, I select everything and press the C key on the keyboard, and then assign a name to it. Okay, from here I can easily change the watercolor. The max and min opacity values are also very important. I'll adjust them until I reach a desired result. The closer the number is to 1, the lower the transparency. Flatness determines the intensity of the normal map's effect. To make the waves move in 2 different directions, I'll copy the normal map or bring in a new one. I repeat the exact same process, panel setup, as above for the second, normal map. Creating the water material can be a bit complex, but once you do it and finalize the settings, you can use that same material for all your future projects. Finally, I search for blend angle corrected normals and connect the flatness output of both normals to it. I then connect this node to the final normal pin. It's best to keep the max and min values within a range of 0 and 1. I'm fast forwarding the video so you can see all the steps involved in achieving good settings, and you should practice them too. The right numbers will come to you after a few tries. I've also added items, parameters, individually so you can see the effect of each one separately. I made a mistake here. I should connect the multiply node to the coordinate pin. The second UV also appeared in the material instance. The watercolor looks right. To set the deep watercolor, I'll copy the parameter and make it slightly darker. If the water speed looks too fast, it's because I've set the video to high speed. In the outliner window, I search for fog and slightly reduce the fog density. As I change these values, notice the effect on the water material. Now, from the outliner window, I search for sun and sky and adjust the sun's direction and intensity. Look at the speed value, which makes the waves too fast, so I'll reduce it now. I set it to 0.05 and minus 0.005 for the two directions. Now the waves are slowly moving in two opposing directions. I'm adjusting the wave size using the UV tiling or UV scale parameter. Generally, we use larger waves for pools. This water looks very good from a distance, and since we plan to render from a distance, it works well. If we were rendering up close, we would also need to adjust the min and max opacity values to make it look more natural. I'm using a pre-made concrete material for this path and adjusting its UVs using modeling mode. I'll also tidy up the surrounding landscape a bit. The decals I'm using here can be downloaded from Thab. The tutorial for that is in the Unreal Assets video, and the link is in the description. These rocks can also be downloaded via Thab. I'm going to foliage mode so I can easily scatter the rocks with high variety. I drag the rock asset into this panel. When I hover the mouse over them, they show a check mark, meaning they will be scattered. I select the paint tool and adjust the brush size. See, the rocks are too large. I'll erase them using the erase tool. When I select a rock, in the foliage panel, it shows me its settings. From this section, I can adjust the density individually for this specific rock. And here I specify the minimum and maximum scale. I can select the rocks one by one and apply different settings to each, or I can select them all together and apply identical settings. these check marks are active, so I quick paint. Just like that, we've scattered many rocks easily. If I quick erase, it will delete the assets that have been checked or ticked. In this case, they are all checked. To introduce more randomness or variation after painting, I'll randomly erase a few sections. I select all the rocks and uncheck them. I downloaded some grass assets from Quixel Bridge. I'll drag them into this panel. I'll check or tick them to activate them. Well, we need to adjust their settings. We need to give it some time for it to recognize the grass asset. I'm importing grass asset from Quixel Bridge. You should now import from Fab. I added this grass too. It's best to check that they are set to Nanit mode so the scene doesn't become too heavy. Since we converted them to Nanit, it takes a moment for the conversion to happen. Okay, it's fixed now. Now I reduce the brush size and erase these sections. I import a chair modeled in 3ds Max with an OBJ extension using the import content option. Well, their scale is messed up, but that's okay, we'll fix it. If this option, snapping, is enabled, I can set the rotation to snap by 90 degrees or any other angle we need. I delete the chairs I don't want. I copy the chairs and arrange them, and I'll also give them a simple wood material. I open the wood material we created for the railings and build a UV setup for it so we can control the texture tiling. I'll also convert these maps into parameters. Right-click and convert to parameters. From now on, we can replace the existing maps with any number of new maps in the material instance without needing to create a brand new material. To complete the material, I'll also create a parameter for metallic and specular. I'll create a duplicate of this material instance to use for the under ramp material, and I can very easily assign the maps I want to it. To be able to control the normal map as well, I'll create a flattened normal node in the parent material and promote the flatness to a parameter. Any change I make in the parent material will also be applied to all its instances. I assign the second material instance to the under ramp area. I adjust how the material sits on the ramp using the projection type in modeling mode. For the top rails, we must select the top rail component itself from this section, the Details panel or Outliner, before assigning the material. Because it was modeled in Revit and the rail has various parts, I created its material very easily. I fully explained how to create metallic materials at the end of a material creation tutorial video. The link is in the description, and I'll also place the video itself in the end screen. This ramp area won't appear in the renders, but I'll assign a concrete material to it anyway. create a sequence or cinematic, I click on this icon. I select the first option. I'll write a name for it and create a new folder to keep my content browser organized. I create a camera from this panel and then I click on it in the outliner window and drag it here. I prefer the railings I modeled using Revit massing, so I'll isolate them in Revit and export a datasmith file from them. I select the old railings and delete them using the keyboard's delete key. Now I import the file from this panel. I downloaded this material from Quixel Bridge, which you can now access through Fab. Here, I can give our material a grayish tint using albedo tint. I made the material for the underrib area slightly darker. From the File tab, I select Save Current Level As and create a new level so I can implement new lighting settings without losing the current setup. I plan to do the evening lighting using an HDRI map. I click on it and enter the new level. If we want to light the scene using an HDRI map, we must first search for sun and sky in the outliner, and then delete it using the keyboard's delete key. This residual light is due to clouds and fog, and also because Unreal hasn't finished the lighting process yet. Otherwise, the scene should be completely dark. From the Lights panel, I select HDRI Backdrop. I search for camera and check the Use Camera Projection box so the map is positioned correctly. Our HDRI map is the sphere. I increase the size from this panel. I click on the magnifying glass icon, and now I can select one of these maps. You can also drag any HDRI map you have previously downloaded here and then replace the default map with it. I select the HDRI map and rotate it to position the background part we want behind the building. We adjust the brightness using the intensity parameter. I'll teach you professional lighting in future videos. Here, I want a general yellowish light that contrasts with the background. I control the color temperature from this section. I control the intensity of the light from the intensity parameter. If you don't see the light bulb icon in the scene, press the G key on the keyboard to make the icons appear. If you press it again, the icons will disappear. I select the light bulb, hold the Alt key on the keyboard, and then move it. Okay, I'll copy this light to illuminate the surroundings of the building. I select the light bulb and set its mobility to movable. I also reduced this light's attenuation radius so that it only covers the interior of the building. I'll make its color a bit more orange. The sphere is the HDRI map. I reduced the attenuation radius of this light as well. I copy a few of the light sources around the building to make its volume clearly visible. I had previously created a sequence. I also create a camera and drag it into this panel, the sequencer. When the camera is selected, we have access to its settings in the Details panel. From this section, we can select a preset resolution. And here we can manually enter our desired dimensions. I'll create a keyframe for the transform track to record the camera's location. I move the time cursor to the end, define the camera's new position, and create another keyframe. Now I play it to see the result. I hold the control key and scroll with the mouse wheel. Now I can change the timeline duration. Every 30 frames equals 1 second. This red line shows the end of the film, render range. And the important point is that I drag the end marker all the way to the end of the sequence. Otherwise, it won't render the whole film. By clicking on the camera and the arrow, I exit the camera's perspective and the sequencer view. I'm creating a new sequence and setting its dimensions to square, just like the previous sequence. I define the movement path by creating transform keyframes. Now I'll increase the time duration. I finalize the camera angle and create a keyframe. I delete the previous keyframe. Now I drag this new keyframe to the previous position. I want the final section to gradually become dark, so I search for post-process volume and click on this icon. I double-click on the main level and enter it. We created this sequence and camera together previously. Well, you've learned the steps, so let's create different animations together. When a keyframe is triangular, the movement is linear. This means, unlike the circular state, the movement speed does not slow down at the beginning and end, it is uniform. You can download this pack from Fab. Just search for its name and it will be available to you for free. I go into the effects panel, and I can use these two effects, one of which is a flock of birds and the other is falling leaves. I just drag them into the sky. I copy the leaf effect and scatter the copies throughout the space. The number of leaves has increased. We also need to import the effects, like leaves, birds, separately for the night level. To slow down the camera movement, I'll increase the timeline duration and the distance between the keyframes. I select the keyframes, right-click, and choose the circle interpolation. For example, cubic or auto for smooth, non-linear movement. These are the settings used for this render. I click on this icon, the Movie Render key button. I enter its settings. I remove JPG output. From the settings panel, I add anti-aliasing PNG and high-resolution outputs. In the output settings, I check this box, use custom frame rate, and select 30 frames per second. From here, I can specify the save location. I set this option, anti-aliasing quality, to the third item. Here we type in 64 or 32, referring to the spatial temporal sample count. After the rendering is finished, I open Photoshop. I click on Open. I select the first rendered image and activate this checkbox, Image Sequence. From the Window tab, I click on Timeline. Finally, from the File tab, I select Export Greater than Render Video. We render the remaining sequences in the same manner. To get a high-quality animation, we follow these steps. I'll enter the sequence. Click on the three-dot menu and select Movie Render Queue. Now I'll click on this icon. This is the name of the sequence we're about to render. We can change it from here. These are the settings used for the specific render. I will go over the 4K settings with you right after this step. If I click here, it will bring up the render settings. I plan to first render the output as a sequence of PNG images, and then combine those images in Photoshop to create the final video. I'll select the JPEG output and delete it using the keyboard. Then, from the settings section, I'll choose PNG output. Next, I'll go back to settings and select anti-aliasing. Here, I'll enter the number 32 or 64 if we want higher quality. I'll check this box, override anti-aliasing, and select the third option. Finally, from the settings section, I'll select the high resolution option. I'll enable this checkbox to activate the high resolution setting. Then I'll enter the output section. This shows the default location where the images will be saved. We can set any custom location we prefer. This is where we can change the naming format, but I'll keep the default format. I'll activate this checkbox, use custom frame rate, so I can change the frame rate. I'll select 30 frames per second, FPS. Finally, I'll click Accept. This window shows the current output location for the images, but as you saw, to change the save path, we must do it through the settings in the output section. Now I'll click on Render and let the engine finish the rendering process. If you want to render in 4K, there are just a few minor differences in the settings we need to adjust. For anti-aliasing, I set the spatial sample count to 32 or 64. I make sure to check the override anti-aliasing box. I'll leave the anti-aliasing method set to none, because we are now primarily relying on the high spatial sample count for superior quality. I will also check the boxes for the warm-up settings here. For the render warm-up count, I can set it to either 64 or 120. I'll enter 120 to ensure maximum stability for our lumen and tiling features. For high-resolution settings, keep the tile count at 1 if your output image is 108 OP. However, if you are rendering in 4K, you must enter a minimum value of 2 for the tile count. You can also use 3 or 4 for increased stability. For the overlap ratio, you should input a value between 0.01 and 0.02. Finally, check the override subsurface, scattering box only when you have specific materials like skin or curtains shear fabrics in your scene. For the output settings, I will set the resolution to 3840*2160. And for the frame rate, I'm gonna choose 30 FPS to resolve the high resolution warning. We need to set the exposure to manual. The details panel is currently closed, so I will bring it back up from the window tab. In the details panel, I'll search for exposure and set the metering mode to manual. Now I can precisely adjust the light levels. By manually setting parameters such as f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO, you ensure that the lighting is exactly what you want and that it remains consistent throughout the entire animation. Well, you saw how we managed to bring this stunning architectural render of the Ribbon Chapel by Hiroshi Nakamura Nap Architects to life in Unreal Engine, complete with all the details, including the landscape and the moving water material. And now for some great news regarding our upcoming projects. In the very next video, we're moving into a completely different environment, the 3D modeling and rendering of a breathtaking mountain villa, full of fascinating environmental challenges and unique materials. And after that, get ready for a full tour, because we will cover the entire process of building, rendering, and touring the Buck Country house with brand new tutorials. So don't miss out on these opportunities. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please give the video a like and leave your thoughts in the comments below. To make sure you don't miss any of the exciting upcoming tutorials, be sure to hit that subscribe. Until the next adventure in ArchViz, take care.